Todd, hey, thanks for coming. We'll do some quick introductions. Tom's gonna give us just kind of a scene setter here, and then we'll get right into the business. Good, Tom?
Yep.
Okay.
Absolutely. I've introduced all of you to our two guests that will be part of the presentation. And before they begin, I just want to take a moment and refresh our memories on what it is we're trying to accomplish in communication infrastructure project. The board established 3 goals. 1, to totally revamp the 911 first responder system and take it from the 18th century to the 21st century in its abilities. The second thing was to continue to build on the broadband fiber that has been run in the county and continues to be run. And third, to actually construct towers that would be used by the 911 system in the western part of the county, along with a partner, US Cellular, who would provide additional broadband services wirelessly, as well as cellular service. And the cellular service is also tied to 911, because without the cellular service, we can't do digital paging. As you know, our volunteers don't sit in buildings all day long waiting on calls. So having that capability is really important. We said that there would be 5 basic phases of the project. The first phase is to stabilize the current system. And so at this point, that process is in motion, and I will, later in the meeting, we'll give you a brief update on what's been accomplished there. You may remember that we said we wanted to build 3 cellular towers that the county would own. But also, we have 2 additional towers, which would be shorter, but absolutely critical that have been added to the project. One is Pond Mountain, because the Pond Mountain Tower has been basically condemned and will be critical to the 911 system. And then the White Top Tower for law enforcement and first responders has been condemned, and the Park Service won't let us repair it. And so we're going to be relocating that tower to Pond Mountain off of White Top Mountain. We also will replace all of the 911 transmission equipment using microwave and other technologies. And then last but not least, 5G wireless and cellular services were deployed by US Cellular, and they have said that they would also begin to upgrade their current towers in the eastern half of the county as well to upgrade the level of service. So tonight, or this afternoon, we have Sarah Fry, who is from PFN. You may remember we contracted with her firm to do the financial analysis, because it's nice to have a goal, but can we pay for it? And Sarah's going to help answer that question. And then Mike Lockaby is also here, and he will talk about some of the legal structure of how the wireless authority and the county will work together to accomplish our goals once, when and if you approve the overall project later in the first quarter of this year. So with that, Sarah.
Good afternoon, Mr. Chair, members of the board. Appreciate the opportunity. As Tom mentioned, Sarah Fry with PFN Financial Advisors. So we help companies issue debt and manage debt portfolios. I've been doing that for over 20 years, and I've been really happy to work with the county on this important project. So we'll jump right in to slide 2, please. So the project is, as Tom described, is putting in the towers and the equipment. The total estimated cost on that is just over $4.2 million. That's in the table on the right of your slide. That does include contingencies for those costs. And the county has identified some cash and some funds on hand to be able to go towards the project, just over $1.7 million in total. Some of that is federal funding, the Tobacco Commission funds, the ARPA funding that came through some of the federal funding a few years ago, and then the set aside on the real estate tax rate is just around $850,000. So that leaves a balance to finance just over $2.5 million for the project. We recommend that we finance that $2.5 million through a state-run program. It's run by the Virginia Resources Authority. And when we initially started working with Tom, that was our goal, was to develop a financing structure that would be acceptable through that program, because we believe that would be the lowest cost and also administratively easy for the county. So we're happy that we have a plan of finance that should work through that program. And I'll talk about that a little bit later, more as we go through. The next slide, really just starting with the cost of this debt. So if you're financing $2.5 million, what will that cost you? And we have the estimates here. These are based on current market conditions. Through this program, the actual interest rates wouldn't be set until May, so a little bit later in the year, so subject to change until we get to that time. But based on current estimates and the repayment structure that we're recommending, the estimated annual debt service is approximately equal to a penny on the real estate tax rate, which is one of the things that I know Tom had talked about, is that is a goal, and that appears to be working well. So what we have on the left side of this table, the recommended amortization of the debt, is that you would repay that over 20 years. The estimated interest cost, again, this is current market conditions. We had a little bit of cushion to that, knowing that it could fluctuate. That borrowing cost of just over 4.2%. That average debt service is $185,000 a year, which again, close to the current value of a penny on the tax rate. One of the things that we've talked about as a team thinking about this project is just the useful life of these assets. One of the basic principles when financing projects is you don't want the debt to go longer than the useful life of the assets. And in this case, the towers have a very long estimated useful life, over 50 years potentially, whereas the equipment much shorter. So we're really focused on that, the number in the bottom row, the average life of the debt. I think with the recommended amortization, 11.5 years, still very aggressive and well within the useful life of the project as a whole. The other alternative we talked about was a more aggressive repayment structure. So instead of paying the same principal and interest payment every year, like you do on a mortgage, actually paying more principal more rapidly. And that would get to a slightly lower true interest cost, just under 4%. But that average annual debt service would be a little bit higher. So going from the $185,000 to $250,000 a year. On the next slide, looking at the impact of this, so that was the debt service, and how does this impact the county's financial condition? And so to evaluate that, we looked at the metrics that the Virginia Resources Authority, the financing program, is going to use to evaluate your credit worthiness when you apply for the financing. And the metrics they use are very common industry standards for financial health. There are 3 metrics that relate to debt. Is the debt affordable? And there's a metric that relates to liquidity, the amount of fund balance that you have available. The bottom line in each of these is that the county's financial condition, even with the proposed debt, is very strong. Scores in the most favorable category. So just going through these, the debt service to expenditures category, that looks at really budgetary affordability of the debt you're taking on. By their metrics, under 10% is strong, and with this debt, you're closer to 6%. The second one, the debt payout ratio, measures how rapidly you repay your debt. And so higher is better there, at anything over 60% being in their strongest category, and you're estimated to be well over that. Total debt to assessed value within the county, anything under 2 is good, and you're, again, very well within that, close to 0.6% with the proposed debt added on. And then again, the last one, the fund balance, is close to 4 times what they consider to be strong. So the financial condition, we think, is very strong to take on the additional debt. On the next slide, we show what the annual debt service is for the county. The blue columns represent the existing debt service that the county has, primarily for schools. And then the green layered on top would be the proposed debt for this project. You can see current debt service around 1.4 million. The proposed debt doesn't significantly increase over time because you have a little bit of capacity in the near term. But altogether, you can see that debt service staying in the $1.4 million range to 34 before there's additional capacity a little further out.
So Sarah, if I may, this particular graph, is it telling us that really by borrowing the additional funds, we really are not increasing our total payments on an annual basis because the school debt continues to go down, which gives additional money out of the current budget that's been allocated to school debt over the years to help support this. Is that?
That's correct. Just on the next slide, just to talk about the financing program a little bit more. So what we're looking at again is a state-run program through the Virginia Resource Authority or Virginia, or VRA, called the Virginia Pooled Financing Program. And the way it works is any localities, entities across the Commonwealth who are looking to borrow funds can go in together. And VRA goes out and issues the debt. They manage all of the debt process. They share the costs of that among the participants. And there's also credit support from the Commonwealth of Virginia for the program. So it comes with very high credit ratings and therefore low interest rates. So you would be a participant in that pool, which sells, routinely in May of each year and then again in the fall. We have had a number of discussions about the tax status of this, and particularly with the agreement with U.S. Cellular being a private company and using the towers. How does that impact the project? And very happy that we are optimistic that we think we can finance the entirety of the $2.5 million on what's called a tax-exempt basis. So that's going to result in the lowest borrowing cost again compared to other potential tax treatments. And the way the debt structure would work, the county would enter into a lease with VRA, and that lease would be secured by some type of physical assets. What we're recommending is that those assets that collateralize the loan are not in fact the project, that those are something different, potentially a courthouse, a fire station, something else essential owned by the county. And the reason for that is that tax treatment, that we actually pledge the project, it complicates that and potentially results in a higher interest rate on the borrowing.
Can we ask questions?
Sure.
Does the collateral have to be equal or more than the loan amount?
If it is essential collateral, it needs to be 70% of the loan amount, so it can be even less.
Okay. And when we financed for the school, is there already a lien on the courthouse or firehouse?
There is not. That's actually, I believe, a general obligation debt, which means it's secured only by the taxing power of the county.
Okay.
So this financing structure is a little bit different than the general obligation debt. Again, it would have collateral security. And the other difference is that the payments on the debt service would be subject to annual appropriation by the county board. That's the legal structure that's used. That's a commonly used financing structure in the Commonwealth. It does give the board the choice to appropriate, but we would very much say that any failure to appropriate and pay debt service would have significant negative consequences to the county. So in this case, if you fail to appropriate and pay the debt service that was due, VRA could come and take that whatever asset for pledge, that collateral. And then if you were to go finance future projects, that would be a problem. It could be challenging because of the history of not paying debt service.
You won't be able to get a library card. I'm only sort of joking. Yeah, exactly. If you lease it to them, and so they don't technically take the property, but they can lock you out of it for a good long time and make your life very miserable, and that's what they're relying upon as the collateral.
So the last
One more question, real quick, if I can. The U.S. Cellular equipment that will be hung on towers that the county owns, will there be lease payments from U.S. Cellular for using our tower?
Minimal,
So essentially, no.
essentially.
In a way, from the perspective of the bonds, that's actually somewhat helpful, because if they're paying you too much, you run into taxability issues. So you want to get a little bit, maybe, to try to defray some of your ongoing, O&M costs, but you don't want to get, I know it sounds odd, but from the tax perspective, you don't want to get too much.
What about, could we ask for maintenance on the towers?
Yes.
Yeah.
Probably one of the reasons the county's gonna own the towers. Even if we said, forget USA, we still are gonna have to build 3 towers in the western end in order to execute the 911 plan that Paul and Shane have put together. So by working in partnership with them, we can build the towers and own them, and then let them put equipment on those towers in addition to our 911 equipment to offer and upgrade cellular service and broadband wireless services out in that part of the county.
And we haven't gotten into the design phase of the tower yet. Keeping in mind that we've got a tower that's overloaded on Point Lookout, can we overbuild what's required?
The beauty of the towers that are being proposed is they will be way overbuilt. Just like any tower that's put up today by these vendors. And when we replace the tower at White Top on Pond Mountain and also Point Lookout, we will overbuild those. But the landowner, Shane, help me if I'm wrong, but the landowner on Pond Mountain has said, if we pay him $100 a month, he'll let us put a tower on his property forever because he wants to help the county, but you can't put anything else on it other than county communication. So we will overbuild it because, as both of those gentlemen would tell you, we know what communication equipment is today. 10 or 15 years from now, who knows what would have to be mounted. So you got to overbuild it.
So does that run into a kink with locating a cellular provider?
Are you talking about just about Pond Mountain, or are you talking about?
Yeah.
So under the financing structure, then the county would be entering into the lease with VRA and then transferring those funds over to the wireless authority for use. Tom asked me to touch on what happens to those funds, not going to his personal bank account, but those would be invested. There is actually a state-run program for investing tax-exempt bond proceeds, and in addition to earning interest in a market rate, it also tracks some of the reporting that the IRS needs when you sell tax-exempt bonds, and so it will be helpful for that purpose. The last slide we had prepared here is just to talk about the schedule and the steps. So we have the briefing that we're doing here this afternoon. Happy to take comments, questions, feedback today, not asking for formal action. The next step in the process would be to submit the application to the pooled financing program that's due February 2nd. And then we would enter into this process with VRA where they review the credit, those financial health like we talked about. We talked to Mike about the legal structure and the tax issues, and we vet that. We talk about the loan terms. And then we come back to both the county and the wireless board, likely in the March timeframe, with the actual documents that need to be considered and approved to move forward. So we get those approvals, and then the sale of the bonds, and when the interest rates would be locked in, would be early May. And then May 22nd is the planned date when the bonds would close. You would have those funds on hand, would be transferred over to the wireless authority and invested. And then the debt service would begin payment 6 months later in October of this year. So again, that's all we had prepared. Happy to take comments, questions.
I just got a question. So for the asset that we would have to put up as collateral, you said It would be 75% of the original amount.
That, it needs to be at least 75% of the amount you're financing, the 2.5 million.
And have you all kind of beat around any potential that?
Yeah.
You prepared to share?
Yeah, we're talking about the courthouse.
Okay. All right. Is that our main option, I guess?
The value of the courthouse, worth $1.8 million.
Well, I want space. There's no other assets that we have that we can offer that would satisfy the requirements of this.
There may be a few. I've actually requested the debt schedule and comparing it to the insurance values to see if there's another asset that we can land on. So,
And we would bring that back later in the first quarter as part of a formal recommendation with the documents.
So that'd be all part of that one action.
How close do we think we are on this 2.5? I mean, it seems to me that putting 3 towers in the west end with road access and purchasing the property could get fairly expensive in time. I think when we were talking with US Cellular last year, they were saying a tower's about $1 million. I may be remembering that
Yeah,
wrong, but
the tower, the biggest tower that the government let cellular companies use today costs about $1 million. But that's a 285-foot tower with capacity for multiple vendors, et cetera. What they're proposing here are towers that are about 140 feet tall. We have an advantage in that they have done their geospatial evaluation, and they can literally tell us within 10 feet of where they would prefer to put the tower. And part of our job will be to go to those landowners and start talking to them. Now, I've looked at all 3 locations, and they were assuming that they'd have to build a mile of roads, run electricity at least a mile to get to the tower. 2 of the 3, there are Christmas tree roads within 500 feet and power within 800 feet. So when I shared that with them, they said the cost of the tower was just reduced another $180,000. They are
and
confident.
who is this? The cellular company?
USA.
That we're talking to?
Yes.
But we're gonna have to do all the negotiating.
We do the land. They will contract with them to build the towers.
Okay.
And the good thing about it, Mr. Chairman, is they have the resources. You know, we've all been concerned about having vendors that have the resources to pull the project off. They literally will have 3 teams. The first team comes in, does all the land evaluation, the legal work, et cetera. The second team comes in, builds the roads, puts the power in with AEP's help. The third team actually comes in and builds a tower, and they can build a tower in 5 months from ground zero to having it operational. And they will space it so that when their goal is to start the first tower in April, early May of this coming year. And they will start the second tower 90 days later and the third tower 90 days after that. So they will actually be building in a stair-step approach. Their goal is to try to get all the towers up before next winter. Because obviously January to March is not a great time to build anything in the western part of county. But I think one of the advantages we have with US Cellular or any of those companies is they have the resource capability to put things together and make it happen.
One more question. I may be getting ahead of myself, but say it does go over budget. How's that pertain to the contract?
Well, there'd be a guaranteed maximum on the build of the tower. Plus, we've added a 10% overage, and they put $120,000 over for each tower. So we've got over about $250,000 built into the budget for contingencies by tower. Now,
What happens if we're under budget? Do we borrow less money? Or would that, I mean, I'm learning in government the past 2 years that having perfect zeros on the budget is,
Well, Mike, correct me if I'm a step out of line on this, but in the budget that they showed you, Mr. Chairman, we're proposing to pay ourselves back $300,000 of the cash that we'll put into this project. So if we end up having money left over, we can actually repay ourselves more than $300,000 because we're going to put $1.7 million in the project.
You could do that, or assuming we structure it as a prepayable thing where we can return money to VRA, we could return the money to VRA and thereby be paying less interest on the principal. But that's a little bit dependent upon what winds up being negotiated with VRA.
Good questions. Other questions?
do you have a site map of where the towers would be located, or would that be closed session stuff?
That we need to do that in closed session. I don't want to get too many people too excited and just beating the doors down, wanting to offer their property. But literally, I could tell you within 15 feet of where they prefer. And what they do is they create a ring around that pinpoint and they can tell you if you don't have this piece, but you get that piece, then it might impact cellular service by X%. But the mountains they're planning to put them on, they said we got a lot of latitude within the quarter-mile range. So I know two of the landowners, and I have a feeling they'll be cooperative. The third one, I don't know personally, but most people, if the county owns it, honestly, their first question is the county going to own them? Yes. We want to help the county.
That's good.
How does their locations, how does it align up with your microwave pass? Is it?
Yeah, we've had some contact amongst us and the U.S. Cellular engineers, and we had to slightly move one of their sites so that it would align with our needs for microwave. But so far, everything's lining up very well.
Yeah, we don't have any sites that we need that are outside of their ring. And as long as we're in the ring, they'll tell us you tell us which one that you want to put it on, we'll put it there. So we did take that into consideration with Shane said.
Mr. Chair, one more question. Will we have coverage maps of the service
Yes.
to look at for citizens?
I've seen a preliminary map of the three towers, and they'll reach 97% of the people in the western end of the county within 3 locations with 5G cellular service.
I can tell you actually that they tend to be somewhat cagey with the actual maps. So I don't know whether you'll be able to give them directly to citizens. It may be more of a citizen needs to come up and say, can you hit me? And the answer, and have to get the answer rather than having a whole map that they can look at. But you will probably see the map itself, and they'll be able to give a straight answer to anybody who asks the question.
Question. Last year, we were talking about getting the new, what's it called? Like the digital radio that we were going to partner with Hillsville.
P25.
P25. Well, we no longer need that system. Will this negate us having to spend the $6 million on that project?
Shane and Paul have worked on scoping the total project, and that 2.8 million that did not include towers is now down to 1.6 million, and it is built into this budget. So we will have the money needed to accomplish what was recommended.
We'll still have to purchase the equipment, but we can hang it on these towers.
Correct. That's correct.
Okay.
Shane, is that a reasonable answer?
Yes, sir.
Okay. we sort of covered 2 and 3 already with your questions, which were great questions. Mike, anything else we need to talk about, or Sarah? Okay,
Sarah covered it all, but I'm more than happy to answer questions.
okay. A brief update on 911 stabilization. The handhelds and the mobile repeaters are in. Paul and Shane are going to be meeting with our 911 group representing the volunteer agencies this month, I believe. Paul, isn't that right?
Sure.
To talk about the process of distributing those radios and having appropriate documentation signed by each agency, because obviously that will be county-owned equipment, unlike all the radios up to this point that were paid for by the agencies. We also have purchased but have not received all of the equipment to do some equipment replacement on Point Lookout. Some of the actual equipment that we have mounted is gasping for breath, and we got to replace it. And have actually replaced some of that already because it just went out. We have the equipment for the White Top Tower and also for Rugby's tower. And the total cost is right in line with our budget. It's about $412,000, which is what y'all saw 60 days ago when we presented the preliminary budgets for that. And if weather is permitting, the goal is to have all that completed by April. Towers, equipment, etc. for the stabilization.
These 3 towers, will it completely solve the 911 communication issues that we have in the West End?
Well, Shane, if you want to take that, you're the technical expert, but you put Pond Mountain's tower with those 3, that pretty much covers the western end, I believe.
Yeah, the western end is in very bad shape. These 3 towers will certainly help, but it's going to be a collective of new equipment across the entire county that's really going to make the difference. Right now, we're lacking the infrastructure in the west to even build anything. So yes and no.
Once we hang the new equipment on the new towers, that will solve.
We'll be in much better shape. Light years.
As far as the distributing the radios to each agency, is the process for that is each member gonna get one? Is the county gonna buy the same amount now, or is each agency gonna be responsible for some of that?
I think the most direct answer to that is no. Not everybody who carries a radio today is going to get a brand new radio. Anybody that is in the primary responder group is planning to get a new radio. But I can tell you, for example, in White Top, we got people that hadn't run a call in 10 years that have radios on their kitchen table, listen to everything that's said whenever it does work. Those people aren't getting a new radio.
Well, I understand that. I just want to be sure that our people that our people need radios will have.
Well, and see,